Hey everybody, it's Bigfoot week here at Sasquatchers, finally with some extensive Bigfoot content coming your way.
Only
This
took like
week,
6 months.
right. This week we begin Bigfoot week with a huge guest in the field, and that is Dr. Jeff Meldrum. And I'm going to let him tell you a little more about himself after the introduction.
The truth is out there. Never stop looking. Never be sheep. Always disrupt. We are the ungovernable. We are the truth seekers. We are Sasquatchers.
Okay, and now, without any further mishaps with our technical difficulties there, we have Jeff Meldrum. Wanted to thank you for coming onto the show, and I'll allow you a moment to let everybody know about yourself.
Sure. Well, as you point out, my name is Jeff Meldrum. I'm a professor of anatomy and anthropology at Idaho State University, where I've been for just over 30 years, 31 years. That translates to teaching graduate level human gross anatomy, full dissection laboratory, to graduate level health profession students. Occupational therapy is the principal, and physical therapy. And then and of course I teach other courses in the health professions, as well as occasionally in anthropology. I do research on the evolution of human bipedalism. That is, those specialties associated with our somewhat unique habit of walking on two legs. And as a result of that research emphasis, that is what dovetailed with the I must admit, long-standing interest, although it was latent for quite a period of time, in the question of the existence of Sasquatch. And so, especially the footprint evidence is the principal arena of my interest and focus on this question. But yeah, so I've published extensively. I've written on the subject, spoken publicly in both professional and public forums. I am the editor of an online peer-reviewed journal entitled The Relic Hominoid Inquiry, which is an open access journal, which will be of interest to your viewers. Great source. We're now in our 13th year, so it's been a steady stream of very good quality submissions to keep our interested audience aware and informed on a variety of topics, and to stimulate the participation of other scholars, as well as a recent push to emphasize citizen science, to try to raise the bar a bit when it comes to, I'm always hesitant to use the word amateur, but non-professionals, oftentimes, which bring very professional skills to bear on the question and in their field efforts, but to try to raise that bar so that more people are using good techniques and good objectivity in the discovery, documentation, and reporting of evidence. So I'll leave it at that. Turn it back to you.
All right. First, I just want to. I said off air, but I do want to express my gratitude that you've taken the time to talk to us. It's a pretty serious honor for us. We appreciate it, and I do know that. I mean, there were at least rumors. I don't know what the extent was that you were having some health issues recently. So I just want to say that I'm glad that if any of that was true, that it's turned around and you seem to be doing better.
Oh yeah, it was, and it was not intended to be mysterious. I was kind of out of commission, but my wife was rather protective of our privacy. It was actually quite a fascinating story. As many men my age, struggle with AFib, and mine has become persistent, not operable. So as a result, I'm on blood thinners to prevent clots. Had a very close call with a clot just a number of years ago, which actually brought all this to my attention and to a head. But the short story is, I was on the first inaugural Alaskan Bigfoot cruise as one of the speakers, and while on that cruise, um, there was a nasty flu as well as some cases of COVID going around on the ship, and unfortunately, my wife and I caught the flu, and it was a really aggressive flu with a lot of congestion, which meant there was a lot of violent coughing. And apparently, I had developed a weak spot. It's never quite clear. Maybe there was an aneurysm or some weak spot, but I burst an artery due to the violent
Oh,
coughing.
wow.
Nearly bled to death. And so anyway, it was a whole series of adventures, getting off the ship, getting to Ketchikan on a Coast Guard cutter, getting life flighted to Bellingham, and having surgery to seal the clot. By the time they were done, they had used the equivalent amount of blood, about 15 units of blood. That's 2.5 people.
Oh,
So
yeah, that is a
it
lot.
was, yeah. So it was very, very serious. And yeah, I mean, at one point they were preparing my wife as they rolled me into surgery, preparing her for the very probable uh, event that I didn't survive the surgery. So it was very tough on her, and she was a real trooper and held everything together, and got us home eventually, and taking care of me for. So I was kind of out of commission, sideline convalescing, and letting my system deal with all that and recover. So pretty much back in the saddle, still feeling the effects, and need to regain some of that strength and stamina that I'm more used to. It's kind of hard to be so left, not invalid, but walking considerable distances is now for the time being out of the question. And so otherwise, I'm busy. I'm back at work now this semester, and working on writing projects, doing podcasts, doing speaking engagements and interviews, and very happy to be back in the saddle.
Yeah, that's it. I don't maybe luck, just or maybe something else bigger than that. But
Yeah, who
I'm glad
knows? Whichever.
that it all worked out in your favor for sure. Um,
Absolutely. Yeah. And I wanted to thank everyone. There was such an outpouring of expressions of support and prayers shared, and so forth, and concern. It was humbling, and very appreciated, all the expressions of concern, and they were felt, and I'm sure they helped. So thank everyone for that.
yeah, absolutely. It's cool to see our community kind of band together once in a while because despite all of the, you know,
Yeah.
um, I
Differences
mean,
of opinion. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, I can sometimes get together, and it unfortunately over near tragic events like that seems to be the case. But
Sure.
it's just nice everybody can band together when a lot of times all we do is argue in these
Sure.
kinds of fields. So
Yeah. It reminds you what's really important, and where your priorities should be, and so forth, and to keep everything in perspective. So it was good for that.
right. Okay, so we'll move on from that. I had a couple of questions, and they were in no particular order, and mainly centered on I believe it was your first book that kind of was it the first book that looked into the footprints?
Well, there was a chapter a very meaty chapter on the footprints in Sasquatch Legend Meets Science, which you have in your tagline there below me there. That is that is a very comprehensive treatment of many different lines of evidence, and the observations and conclusions drawn by a wide variety of experts with different expertise. So each chapter sort of addresses a specific line of evidence, from footprints to hair to vocalizations to indigenous traditions and so forth. Yeah, and I've also published many individual papers on various aspects of the footprints, their naming, description, and diagnosis, for example, as well as many interpretations of their and modeling of their functional morphology, how they're put together in such a way that is quite distinctive from human, retains a lot of primitive hominoid characteristics that are elegantly adapted to the habitat they allegedly occupy, namely steep, rugged, montane forests. So, yeah.
All right. So, real quick, we should probably establish that um, as far as the Bigfoot research goes, you are, I hate to use the word strictly because I don't want to make presumptions, but you more so adhere to the scientific kind of approach to it. Like, this isn't really any of what's kind of been called woo research, and so like the portals and kind of some of the other stuff that have been popularized in Bigfoot over the last couple of years. You're more so on the other side of that spectrum.
Yes, I mean, as approaching it as a scientist, specifically as a physical anthropologist, the question I'm addressing is there a biological species behind the legend of Sasquatch? And so the principle, the prioritized approach to that, or questions, are dealing with the biological nature of such an entity. And so envisioning it, or conceiving, hypothesizing it as a relic hominoid, a lineage on our very bushy family tree that has persisted alongside us, but is extremely rare and elusive, and as such has avoided not detection. I mean, it's detected all the time, right? There are lots of encounters of footprints, but have avoided acknowledgement and recognition by mainstream society in the absence of a physical specimen in a museum cabinet or laboratory. So that's and you're right. It's not that I say, oh, all that other stuff couldn't happen. Just as I would not appreciate my colleagues when they say Bigfoot can't exist, therefore it doesn't exist. That's not a scientific approach. But the burden of responsibility then rests on me to present evidence that is compelling and persuasive, at least to the point of justifying pursuit of the question and continued investigation. And that same obligation rests with enthusiasts who turn to other types of explanations, as you enumerated a few, portals and orbs and mind speak and all this other stuff. I mean, those are, so far, all we have are subjective personal anecdotes. No one can produce a replicated event, or, I mean, except in their own mind. But I, to be quite blunt, I have eagerly gone out into the field with individuals making such claims in hopes of sharing in their experience, only to discover that, well, it's not working today,
Right. Yeah.
So maybe I'm the my skepticism is dampening the effect, dispelling the aura or something. Who knows what mechanism? But I don't really think that I'm responsible. But that has been, I've been accused of that, of having a bad doubting heart, and so Sasquatch knows that, feels that, and won't reveal itself to me as a result of my my doubtful demeanor. And so, very convenient explanation, but
Yeah. Um, well, yeah, I mean that happens, and we talk to literally everybody on this show. I am heavily inspired by Art Bell, and just kind of
yeah,
Art's creed was, he would talk to anybody, and he wouldn't, unless it was incredibly outlandish, he wouldn't dispel anything when it was on the show either. So I kind of uh, I
he
I
promoted
go by,
he
yeah,
promoted it.
I go
He
by.
promoted that's the one criticism I had of Art Bell, and the reason I never would accept an invitation for an interview is he knowingly uh, repeated uh, fanciful false stories. His favorite was the Sasquatch that had been shot. I think it was down in Texas and buried in the sand.
Yeah, yeah,
Trotted
Mhm.
that out every 2 or 3 years. The same exact story, as if it was brand new. There were enough new people in the audience that it would fly and get all kinds of attention, and the witness kept upping the ante, upping the bounty, upping the mystery. The supposed map he was going to auction
yeah. You
off.
had coordinates that.
Yeah,
I
so it was, so if Art would have stayed true to his principles, or if he had those, and only explored the accounts rather than promote false ones, then I would have no bone to pick with him. But that was pretty blatant. I knew a number of several interviews with George Norrie, and George always handled the topic very deferentially and respectfully and objectively, is the most important part, and followed the evidence. And uh, I
yeah.
he seemed to lean more towards a naturalistic physical explanation rather than some supernatural paranormal one. But
George just hit over 22 years as the host of Coast to Coast too.
yeah,
So he
yeah,
he just actually outlasted Art Bell as
yeah,
the host of the show.
for
That's
him. Good for him. He
but
had good experiences.
Yeah, but yeah. So I'm actually glad that you had brought that up, because there are a lot of fanciful evidence out there, and claims. And considering your research is so scientific, and that you are somebody who can identify, what would be fake versus what is a real Bigfoot footprint. All of the Facebook groups, and the people that I follow on TikTok and stuff in this field have footprints daily. Every day there's something new posted. And
Yeah.
as much as I want to believe every footprint that I see belongs to a Sasquatch, I kind of have a skepticism within myself that, like, this isn't something that I stumbled upon, and I certainly don't want to discredit anybody for what they may have stumbled upon. But it just seems like footprints are more prevalent than ever. So, what would you look for in a fake footprint?
Yeah. Well, far more common than overt fakery and hoaxing are misidentifications. But let's take the hoaxes first. There was a rash here a few years ago when some of the droughts regionally were rather severe, and it seemed that a number of reservoirs had been drawn down, which exposed these vast mud flats, and it was like a tempting canvas, I guess, to an oil painter, because there were three major hoaxes undertaken, stomping out footprints across these very vast mud flats, which kind of lent themselves to making impressions more easily. Unfortunately, the quality of the footprints was well. Let me qualify that. One case, and let's see. Now I'm shooting from the hip, and unfortunately, my memory got kind of went through the ringer. Um, the one case, the LB Lake, I think it was. Yeah, was one example where the hoaxer actually was quite talented and made a very interesting looking foot, but it was stiff and rigid, and he had introduced some features that were inconsistent with the credible footprint record, and they made no sense anatomically. I'll go ahead and explain. The one, if this were a foot, he included a flexion crease around the uh, separating the big toe and down across, kind of delineating the ball of the foot a little bit. Well, the only reason there are creases on my hand is because my hand flexes and the palm, the tissue of the palm has to bend, and that creates a crease. So to have a crease right here on my hand is because my thumb crosses over the palm to oppose the other digits. Well, a Sasquatch foot doesn't do that, so there's no reason whatsoever to have a crease there. And no, like I said, no other credible footprint has that crease. But they left some remarkably clear footprints that got a lot of attention, and a lot of casts were made. Then there was another one in Oregon, just outside of Eugene, and I can't remember the name of the reservoir now. Cliff Barrickman and Tom Powell cast hundreds, and Cliff came to my office on one occasion. He had a CD where he had photographed each and every one of his casts against a grid background. And we sat and we brought those up on the computer, one after another, just trying to identify any example where you could see movement, and especially independent movement of individual toes with greater spacing or splaying or independent flexion. And in all those, I think Cliff had cast like 110 or 115, not a single variation in distance between toe tips could be identified. There were some where the toes were inclined, more deeply. Well, that's when you have a stiff, if you imagine, you've got a stiff false foot, and if you're pressing, let me get that even, pressing in, if your foot's smaller and this is like a big snowshoe, if instead of walking like this, you actually try to walk like this, it will push the toes in, that rigid, stiff front part of your fake foot at a very decided angle, a very unnatural angle that doesn't mimic the flexion of toes gripping the substrate. Okay, so that one was out. And then there was one that didn't get much publicity because I never posted it or wrote about it. So I've talked about it in a couple of presentations, but our Palisades Reservoir here in Idaho, word got to me that there were footprints discovered across it. So we went out, and it was a great exercise to measure out the gate, to identify the step length and straddle, do all the documentation of the parameters of gait. But the footprints were excessively wide. They were very angular. The edges were sharp. I mean, they didn't even round the fake feet. It was like they were cut out of essentially, a 2x6 or a whatever plank, and stomped across the mud flat. Came in on one boat landing and out another up at the upper end. Anyway, so those are frustrating. I mean, but they're rare. But more often than not, and you're right, on an almost daily basis, I get people sharing, and I appreciate them sharing their photos of footprints, and the majority are either human, very common, just got some this morning, human, or bear, because of that flat hind foot and relatively flat hind foot and 5 toes in contact with the ground, unlike a digitigrade dog or cat where only 4 reach the ground, and the elongated bones mean that the inner digit is up suspended in the air. if it hasn't been nipped off by the breeder, the little dew claw there. Um, and then there are, of course, lots of just ambiguous marks, traces that are so vague and so indistinct that they can't be distinguished as even a footprint. But our eyes, once we have that search image of an elongate footprint, and especially if there's any, the toes are the magical thing, the very significant and eye-catching feature. There's any suggestion of toes, your brain locks onto that and tries to interpret it, tries to find a way to interpret it as a footprint. So there was one just the other day, which there was kind of a hinder part and a forepart. The forepart kind of had some scuff marks that, if you looked at just right, might be the first three toes. The back part kind of looked like it could be a heel, except the shape looked more like a running shoe or a hiking boot, with a wedge, kind of a thick, slightly flaring, those enlarged heel hiking boots to dissipate that contact. And if you look just right, and this is the problem with many photographs and poor lighting, or diffused lighting, like on an overcast day, it's much better if you have some strong side light that brings out the topography with the raised topography with strong highlights and shadows. But just subtly, you could see what resembled tread marks of a waffle tread on a hiking or walking shoe. And so, that's the thing there. When I go to the various conferences, and I display a sampling of footprint casts, those that I bring and that I emphasize are exceptional examples that illustrate either a historical event or a anatomical feature, whether it's a mid-tarsal pressure ridge, or whether, in the case of the Bosberg cripplefoot, it shows a deformity that illustrates subtle details of anatomy that correlate with my modeling of the foot and its distinctive proportionality. Historically significant ones like those associated with the Patterson-Gimlin film, and and some other representatives there in that Northern California region at that time in the 60s, early 70s. And so people see those, and they get this kind of maybe a false impression that if you're out looking for Sasquatch tracks, that's what you're going to find. Those are actually really rare. I mean, they seem, now that they've accumulated over a half a century, they seem like they're very common, but they're not. They're very, very rare. Even Paul Freeman used to be criticized for having kind of a Midas touch. It seemed like he was always finding footprints. Well, there were two things that people overlooked. One, he was in a region that was exceptionally optimal for finding footprints, and that was the Blue Mountains there in southeastern Washington, northeastern Oregon, where, at least at the time, it's starting to change now as there's been a little more development. There's been some more selective logging. The logging road, the roads get improved when big heavy logging trucks have to make their way and can't slide off in the mud. But for a long time, most of the roads, with the exception of the main routes up to the ridge tops, which were well developed and graded and had nice gravel beds, many of the roads were not secondary, they were tertiary. They were just graded dirt, which meant that they were excellent tracking beds. You'd put miles and miles where any wildlife that walked along the road or crossed the road left footprints. And Paul would make a habit of driving those roads in his truck, looking out the window, his arm on the open window, the door with an open window, and looking for any tracks in the dust or tracks in the mud. He'd get up there as soon as the snow had melted off and the roads were passable, and had done that for quite a period of time. Over 10 years, he had when I acquired his collection and it was transferred to my lab, he had 40 pieces. That sounds like a lot. Some of those represented an instance where he witnessed a long line of tracks, and he would cast 6 or 7 of them, or 8 of them. There's one case where there's actually 8 from, I think, from one spot. And so when you sit and look at the dates, if you plot out a timeline, they're spread out quite a bit, and there were gaps of sometimes 2 or even 3 years in that 10-year period where he didn't find anything, or at least he didn't cast anything. So it wasn't like he was just going out there and every trip coming home with another piece to add to his collection. I really think he was, I'm quite convinced, I'm quite confident that with the exception of 1 or 2 pieces that he himself pointed out to me and said, I don't know about this one. Someone called me up and said they'd found tracks, and I went up to look, and here's what I cast. There's 2 or 3 pieces that are obviously molded. That you can tell they actually use their hands. You can see the gutter that it creates. They use their fingers and slid their fingers in the dirt to make the toes, enlarge the toes, and you can see the streak marks that you wouldn't get with a normal step and toe off. So anyway, it's interesting. I mean, it's challenging. It's challenging, and sometimes it gets frustrating. I mean, I really appreciate that kind of pumping up effect of someone sharing what are just stunning examples of a Sasquatch footprint, that are every bit as clear and crisp and compelling as these examples that I show at the conferences. And it just reassures me that yes, people are on rare occasions still finding good, compelling footprint evidence to suggest that Sasquatch is out there.
So what would we do if we found ourselves out and about and happen upon a pretty compelling print? I mean, how would we get that print to a researcher like yourself?
Well, documentation is everything. I mean, otherwise, all you have is a story to tell, of what you saw. And I have learned through experience that you cannot rely on those stories, because in those cases where someone shares a story and has documented what they saw, what what they present me as far as a cast or a photo doesn't hold up to what they describe.
Right.
So documentation is everything. These days, what I would recommend, because if you have, and I don't remember what it is, if it's a iPhone 15 or higher, but you have to have the Pro. So unfortunately, when I traded in, I didn't have the credits to go Pro, and I without paying $800, which I wasn't inclined to do right at that moment for an iPhone. But if you have the 3 camera lenses, that's a Pro, and one of those lenses can produce, or through one of those lenses, it can produce LiDAR. LiDAR is a sort of a laser, I guess. It's a laser, it's not radar, but it's a laser. And with an app, you can do photogrammetry. You can do a very high resolution 3D scan of the footprint. So you don't have to schlep plaster and water and mixing containers and sticks and whatnot, and sit around and wait for the plaster to set up and then try to transport it, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, it's very doable, and there are other alternatives too. I'll mention one of those in a minute, but you can take the LiDAR and use your iPhone and just scan. Someone showed me they had that app on their brand new phone, and they had scanned some really nice wolf tracks, and you could the scan was photo quality in color, And then, but you could also turn it over upside down. Yeah, the undersurface then was colorless. It was just an off-white, and so you could see the positive of the footprint with great relief and no obstruction of any of the overlying material. Uh, and then he walked over. This was at a conference, and there was a display that had a couple of skulls. He walked over with his camera, and in 5 minutes, he had done had done a scan. He comes back and shows me this amazing 3D scan of the skull that you could rotate in space and examine from every angle. So that's the way to go. That's the new technology. Short of carrying plaster around, another quick and easy way to do it, and these techniques you should practice at home. Make a collection of images or casts of your footprints, your family's footprints, your pet's footprints, to practice the technique, because you don't want to be learning by trial and error when you're trying to cast a beautiful specimen out there in the field. There's a material, it's a insulating foam. There's different brands. One common one is Great Stuff, I think it is. And it's the stuff you use, for example, out in your garage or whatever, to insulate around window jambs or door jambs. Squirt it in there, and it expands, and then it hardens. You can get minimally expanding foam, which is preferred, so it's not too airy. Cut out some pieces of cardboard, the size bigger than this, but cut out the size of a average footprint. So I'd make it, about 18 inches by about 10 inches, and slide those down in your day pack along with this canister. And then when you find a footprint, you just take that foam and you start at one end, and you just carefully kind of start applying it. It fills, it expands to fill. So you don't have to put too much, but you just, like you're frosting or decorating a cake, put that piece of cardboard over and a couple of rocks to help confine, so that as it expands, rather than just rising up, it will expand and fill every nook and cranny of the footprint. And I've got some beautiful, beautiful bear tracks that I did that way, and it dries in minutes. And then you've got this very lightweight thing. Sure, you take your can home with you too, or the trash can. You've got this lightweight thing that you can carry that is pretty durable. I mean, it can get crushed, but it won't crack and break into a dozen pieces if like a plaster of Paris or a gypsum cement would. There's another material. Oh, shucks. And someone just told me the name of it. I'm sure you can find it if you Google. I used to use Fix-It-All, which is a patching compound that sets up really nice and hard, but it's not brittle. It will break, but it takes, once it's cured, it takes more to break it than it does to break this very brittle gypsum cement, which everyone raves about. And it's great. It's great to work with, and it's high quality, high resolution. But when you take one of those casts and you tap it, ping, ping, it sounds like a piece of china. Whereas if you take one of these Fix-It-All and you tap it, it goes boom, boom, because it has a dull thud, because of the fiber content that makes it have a little more ductile strength, I guess we'd call it. It resists. I had one cast get bumped by a distracted student off of the lab bench onto the linoleum floor, and watch it bounce without breaking. Now, I wouldn't recommend you do that, because I was darn lucky that was the case, because I have broken them, and especially when they're still green and just out of the ground, you have to be careful and support them and wrap them up. But then, at the risk of appearing pretentious, bring it to my attention. I'm the one that you should have take a look at it and give you an opinion as to its interpretation. But there are others. I mean, Cliff Cliff has been a really uh, what do you call it? Quick study, sharp, picks up things, and has a good common sense. He's very pragmatic and not afraid to. Some people, Dr. Bindernagel was often a little too um, conscientious about offending anyone. I used to be much more diplomatic in my younger years, and I've gotten a little bit more short with, not short, but a little more blunt. I would say blunt with people. I just say, well, okay, now look at that little toe. That little toe's curled in and turned completely on its side. What does that tell you? That alone should tell you this is a human print, or look at that crease across the foot dividing the metatarsal from the heel pad. That's a sign of a bear paw, with individual pads that have coalesced to form this kind of human-ish looking foot, broad human foot. But notice that the inside toe is the shortest of the toes. Instead, it looks like they're walking with their feet reversed, because the bear's inside toe, we don't want to call it the big toe, it has, as does your toe and your thumb, only two bones, two phalanges, whereas the lateral toes have three. And so it's kind of thumb-like in that way, not really divergent like a thumb. But so it's short. It's short. So people will look and they'll think that and they tend to kind of walk on the outside of their foot. So oftentimes the fifth toe is the more prominent and sometimes even the largest imprint. But anyway, that we're getting into Footprints 101. You should read my book or get a hold of my field guide, which has a nice little section on the contrast between bear, human, and Bigfoot, and all of the distinguishing, telling signs, markers basically, are listed under each one for contrast. And it's not rocket science. I mean, once it's explained to you, it just takes a little bit of practice. And that's what I tell people with the internet, the marvel of that the internet can be. You can go on and create your own little archive, create your own little PowerPoint with images of both bear paws, the actual fleshed out paws. There's lots of great images, and I've used them in my workshops and so forth, as well as the footprints, the bear footprints. And you can quickly get a handle on the variation as well as the consistent features that, even in spite of the variation and different appearances in different substrates, you'll recognize it. You'll create your own search image in your mind, and even if you can't describe the anatomy that forms the basis of those distinctions, you can recognize that those distinctions and tell them apart really, really quickly. I mean, there's been some embarrassing, I won't tell those stories, but there's been some really embarrassing incidents that some prominent people in the community, prominent investigators, have done some really silly things. And I sometimes avoid being specific in describing those, but other times it's important that people recognize, because they're out there and they're in the literature and they get rehashed. They resurrect every once in a while, and so you want to kind of set the record straight. Anyway,
speaking of silly events and resurrecting records, I have one that when I was doing some reading in that, I found so an event that took place in 2011, a conference that you went to in Siberia.
Oh, yeah.
In Kemerovo, which is I think I read something like 2,000 miles east of Moscow or something like that. You went in October, so probably wasn't the warmest of time of the year either. So you went to a cave. All right. So you the only American, right, that went to this cave. In this group. And with the Yeti Institute, and the guide, the Igor Burstev,
Yeah,
Um,
Igor Bortsev.
yeah,
Mhm.
So there's Yeti in the cave, okay, and he says something like, you might find some footprints of the Yeti in there, and that kind of tipped you off that there was something greasy going on there. Do you mind
Well,
elaborating on this
oh
story?
yeah. Well, Igor, to his credit, he's a mover and a shaker, and he can get things done when he puts his mind to it. And although Igor and Dmitry Bayanov, who were kind of the two principal faces of well, they tend to use the word snowman or sometimes Yeti, but I mean, this is not the Himalayan Yeti. In Russia, there are reports that do align with the North American Sasquatch, and there are. I think that species extends across the Pacific from Eastern Asia all the way along Southern Asia, skirting the Himalayas and the Mongolian mountains around the Mongolian desert, not the desert itself, but and as far west as the Caucasus Mountains, which I have had the privilege of visiting as well with another Dmitry Pirkulov, and who's a documentary filmmaker there in Russia, Russia's equivalent to Hollywood. Um, Dmitry, and so Igor, uh, the only scientists, unfortunately, over there that they have gotten to be actively involved have largely been social scientists or other academicians like English professors or literature professors. The anthropological community and the zoological community has to large measure turned their backs on the topic, as is the case here. So, with that result, he very deftly turned to the politicians and sold the idea to them that these areas down around Kemerovo. I mean, when we were driving from Moscow down there, it was amazing. There were little ski chalets and winter sports recreational centers popping up all over the place. The gas stations had statues of the snowman with helmets and goggles and snowboards. you know, and and so this was entirely, and it's very obvious to me. There were other American, I mean, well, not Americans. Well, Ron Moorhead was American, and then Igor had invited Robin Lynn, who's the woman who was having had a habituation situation, she claimed, where Igor had spent some time out there, and these things were eating from, she was provisioning them with bags and bags of dog food. They were supposedly braiding her pony's hair, its mane, and doing other things, various other things. And she came at Igor's invitation since he'd spent time there. Anyway, and then there was John Bindernagel, so Canadian. Um, and so, I mean, it became very, very clear that when we were out in Siberia, that this was no longer really a scientific undertaking, and our host out there was the district commissioner, so a sort of similar to a county commissioner, I guess you'd say. And let me say, they were extremely hospitable, gracious, welcoming. Everything was they rolled out the red carpet. In fact, it was so much, it was hard to keep up. I mean, with the jet lag, sometimes that kind of jet lag sometimes takes a day or two to get back into step, and we were go and doing presentations and then jumping on planes and flying to this other place for a little conference, and then out in the field, and it was great, but it was kind of a blur. But anyway, we get out there, so we go. Let me focus. I tend to ramble. We're going to go to this cave, and I was very intrigued by the prospect, because this cave is only a stone's throw. I mean, just like 20 miles as the crow flies from the Denisovan cave, where the DNA of this other Neanderthaloid, or an archaic hominin, had been discovered. And so, there were stories about things happening and this, that, and the other in the region, and we had testimonials from eyewitnesses. There were a couple of game forest rangers that shared reports and accounts that had come to their attention, and they sounded great and so forth. But I mean, there was no way to document them. They were essentially just stories. And then we went out to hike to this cave, and it was quite a drive. And they had military vehicles, these big oversized carry-all things, and we had a press entourage that far outnumbered the the participants in the conference. And as we were hiking to this remote, uh, uh, virtually inaccessible. Oh, and while we were at the lodge, first we checked into the lodge and got settled in, and you go into the dining room, and here are all these photos of the cave at various times of the year. And in the wintertime, it's a wet cave. There's actually a stream that flows right down through it, and it's dripping water. So in the wintertime, it's this beautiful ice palace with ice columns and and icicles everywhere, and it's amazing. So these stunning photographs, and so it was clearly an attraction, and a frequently visited attraction. And so as we get out there after this seemingly ambitious trek in these people haulers with great big tires and everything, and we start hiking, and it's absolutely clear that this is a well manicured path. There's pruning marks of branches being cut, and all sorts of things. And so I asked Makuta, the commissioner. I said, well, so who maintains this trail? He goes, what are you talking about? I said, well, this is a well-maintained trail. I said, who takes care of it? I mean, is it the local people or the rangers? And he goes, oh, no, there's never anything done. I point to a branch right there where it's been trimmed with a pruning shears to clear the trail. No, that's just broken. Well, we get to the cave. We get to the cave, and as you point out, Igor makes this remark, and then voila, footprints appear.
No way.
Yeah, no. So he says this, and he turns right there, and there's a line of footprints. The problem is, and so part of the cave was a little drier and had accumulation of wind-blown dust and so forth, which was great for footprints in the dust. I mean, they weren't pressed in the mud; they were just in the dust. But there were only, and I can't remember if it was right or left. I think it was right. There were only a series of right feet. That was it. There was no left foot to be seen, even though there should be in that with that area of dust that they were found in. And so I, without thinking, just made the flippant remark, well, what was the Yeti playing hopscotch? And that made it on the evening news that night.
Oh.
All the cameras are going, and then of course they found a little tuft of hair in one of the footprints, and it just looked like rabbit fur. It didn't look like Sasquatch hair at all, or wild man hair, any primate hair. It looked like a tuft of fur. And then, so they turned to me. All the cameras focused on me. Well, Dr. Meldrum, what do you think? And I said, well, it's a little. It seems a little unlikely if a Sasquatch or any animal was using this cave as shelter, and it's a wet cave, and it's not the most ideal shelter. There would be signs of their coming and going and other activities. There may be feces, there may be bedding material. And at that point, let me back up, because there was one moment where they're all crowded around the footprints, And then especially when the one of the Russian, he was the professor of English, I think, and he found the hair and he holds it up. So all the press and cameras are focused on him. And at that point, I'm just kind of twiddling my thumbs over here, and I turn around and I sort of wander back into the cave, into the depths of the cave. I had a flashlight, and and one of the cameramen saw me, and he peels away and comes after me. And then right then, Makuta, the commissioner, calls me, "Hey," and he said, he shakes his head, no, and motions for me to come back to the group. Well, it was because just beyond my flashlight beam, after when I made the comment about bedding material, Makuta turns his flashlight, and there's this little alcove underneath the side of the cave wall, and there's this beautiful bed, this nest of about with about a foot thickness of nice dried fern fronds there, and it was, it was pretty good sized, perfect for one of us to stretch out on, and of course Igor, to demonstrate before we can talk about it or maybe look for hair or something in there, he climbs right on it, stretches out, as it's taken in there. And I go, well, yeah. I said, I felt like saying, Igor, is there a chocolate on the pillow? I mean, this was obvious crap. And so in the interview, I tried to be diplomatic, and I tried to just qualify, well, we've seen some interesting things, but we'd have to confirm this and that, and there's the question of this and that, and I'm not really convinced. So it was kind of touchy because they're promoting this, and for commercial development, for popularizing the area and ecotourism and winter recreation. Well, we get back to the lodge that night and had dinner, and it was always a banquet, and of course the vodka's flowing, and I don't drink, so up to this point I've been able to kind of dodge, because there's certain etiquette when it comes to drinking with Russians, and up to this point I've been just pouring some water in my shot glass or some fruit juice and participating in the toasts. But there was this one reporter, she saw me do this a couple of times, and she apparently thought this was cheating. This was not kosher. So on this occasion, before I could, there were no water flasks or bottles, pitchers on the tabletop yet, and no fruit juice handy. So I noticed out of the corner of my eye, she elbows her cameraman, and he runs over and he fills my glass with vodka. And then shortly, moments, I'm thinking, oh crap, you're setting me up. And then shortly after that, Mr. Makuta stands up and to lead a toast, because they toast and toast and toast. And each time you toast, you have to, it's bottoms up. It's not take a sip, it's bottoms up. And so they'll go through vodka like it's water. It's anyway, he says, well, we've had this exciting, adventure, and we're so glad that you're all here. And we went to the cave, and but it seems Dr. Meldrum is a little bit reluctant or a little bit doubtful, I think, of our evidence. And I said, and he said, perhaps he would like to lead us in a toast, our first toast tonight. I figured, oh.
Sped's not standing behind you.
well, yeah, felt like that. They had a couple of interpreters, these young ladies that were great interpreters and spoke very good English. And anyway, so I get up and I try to. I thank our hosts for the wonderful hospitality and all the good food and the good company that we've enjoyed. And I said, and I, count you all as my friends. Therefore, I will toast to pursuit of the truth wherever it may lead. And since you are all my friends, I know that you'll understand when I don't drink this toast with you. Well, they didn't understand what I was trying to say and took that as an affront.
No.
And oh my gosh, I thought I was going to be rowed out on a rail. I thought I'm going to lose my passport here. And it was just, and then one of the academicians, and I think he's a professor of literature and history, but he has done some really interesting work and very insightful. And now I cannot remember his name, I'm embarrassed to say, but we hit it off and we're talking and comparing notes throughout the whole trip. He stood up and he said, no, 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 he does not drink alcohol. It is his religion. And then they, okay, because their social protocol accommodates that, in which case the host will drink the toast in substitution in lieu of the guest who declines. And then they were all okay. And then then you should, because then the journalist felt very embarrassed, and her cameraman, who had on his own volition, who had poured the vodka, comes running over with a glass of fruit juice. And he was apologizing for putting me in that position. And anyway, they just thought I was not being sociable enough. But so it was an interesting, but all the time it was quite clear to me that this was what was going on. And then wouldn't you know it, just it's been about a year now ago, there was actually an article, a press release. And Makuta, who was about to step down, I guess, I think he was about to step down. Anyway, that didn't make any difference. What caught my attention was, for some reason or another, he was acknowledging to the press that, yes, indeed, all of this that transpired for this conference was done in order to promote the economy and the commercial development of winter sports in his district. And that, there may be a Yeti out there, or a snowman, but this was all just smoke and mirrors. And so I've never gotten an apology. Well, I wouldn't expect to. I mean, it's not like this occurred, that Igor was an ignorant victim of the shenanigans of the politicians and entrepreneurs. I mean, I'm sure this was all part of the arrangement, because their stated goal was to actually create a research center out there in Kemerovo, and to encourage, international study of the snowman question, and accumulate, archive evidence and so forth, make it another focal point. I mean, it would just be another tourist attraction. I'm sure they would have a museum, and that's fine. I don't begrudge them the exploitation of the question and the phenomenon. It's the lack of integrity to stick to the evidence and not try to gild the lily or salt the mine, whichever metaphor you want to use. So it was an adventure, but I'm sure I won't be invited back.
Yeah.
I was by Dmitry Kirkorov, as I mentioned, and we went down to the Caucasus, and that was a fascinating experience in and of itself, but unfortunately didn't generate, it's pretty tough to just in 6 or 7 days mount an expedition and do any really serious. All you can really do is kind of reconnaissance, talk to people, but it was fascinating. Let me share one of the high points for me. Well, yeah, one of the high points for me was there had been an encounter, a sighting of a dev. Now, the dev is not the snowman or the Neanderthal-like creature, which could very well be relic Neanderthal, relic Denisovan. The dev is equivalent to Sasquatch. Supposedly stands, between 6 and 8 feet tall, leaves on average 16-inch footprints that are indistinguishable. We managed, as a result of this report, to recover two copies, let's put it this way, copies of 2 footprints, a right and a left, that were cast by the museum director in the village adjacent to this sighting. And apparently a dev had come down out of the woods and traipsed across a pasture and was seen. Went through snow and mud. There was a long line of tracks that could be tracked for a long distance. Excuse me, as I said, the 2 casts were made. One of the witnesses was, I was just going to add, if I took that cast copy and shuffled it in with examples like those I display at the conferences, you wouldn't be able to, it wouldn't stand out to you as inconsistent with the Sasquatch tracks. It's that remarkably consistent in size and proportion and so forth. But we were, there was one of the witnesses who is a local representative, like a state representative in a state legislature. And also, but his day job was he was a guide, a professional guide, would take people on treks back into the mountains. And he was extremely knowledgeable of, and he had written the definitive field guide to the natural history of that region of the Caucasus. So very knowledgeable. Anyway, we bumped into him quite by chance, but Dmitry apparently recognized him, and then we introduced ourselves and what we were doing. That I and Bindernagel were from America, and or no, I'm sorry. In this case, it was just me. It was just me. I was the only one. But I was from America, and I was this. Well, I came prepared with. I had a little thin 3-ring binder, a little flip book with sheet protectors, and a variety of photos of both footprints and casts attributed to Sasquatch. And so I pulled that out, and I wanted to see what he had to say about this, since he had witnessed this line of tracks. He's thumbing through. What impressed me more than anything is he stopped on the images of the Titmus cast with a very distinctive pressure ridge, which has confused so many people and been ignored by so many people. And I've drawn that attention to that. It was kind of the linchpin in my modeling of the flat, flexible midfoot, the transverse tarsal or mid-tarsal break. He saw that and he goes, "Oh, yes." He said, "This is and he didn't have the terminology, but he said, he described the flexion of the midfoot that produces that ridge. And he said there were tracks just like this when it went up a steep embankment, or not a steep embankment, a slope in the mud. It left the mud was more yielding, and it left these differential pressures, impressions under the forefoot, and a very distinctive pressure ridge just like this." I mean, he volunteered that information, and he understood the mechanics without any explanation from me. In fact, he felt like he needed to explain it to me. "You've got this picture in here. You probably don't understand what's going on." And I'm just nodding like, "Oh yeah, wow, that's fascinating." Yeah, and I did explain a little bit through Dmitry what I had been doing and my interest in this, and that was great. Again, to have this, it was just like when I went to China and saw these footprints that showed a mid-tarsal pressure ridge that was identical in position and orientation, appearance to those examples over here. I mean, what are the odds? If this is all just hoaxed, what are the odds that a subtlety, I mean, this is not something that you would think of including in a hoax, just, for whatever reason, just because the only rational interpretation or explanation is that which I've offered. And to see it confirmed in China and also in Russia is just, independently by different people, different observers. The one understood it, the other didn't. The other had no clue until I explained and I showed him. But he recognized the feature, because when we were driving out to where they were going to do the interview and unveil these casts for me to observe and comment upon, they wouldn't let me see them beforehand. I had given the witness, Mr. Yuan, get it straight here. I'd given him a reprint of one of my papers that had an excellent figure with a 3D scan as viewed in several angles of that Titmus cast. He couldn't read the English, but of course, I always have lots of illustrations and figures. I mean, very visual anatomy is a very visual descriptive discipline. He turns the page and he sees that. And man, he grabs hold of my jacket and he's thumping on the page and he's going, you know. And so we just left it at that. I said, okay, you know, we'll take a look. And sure enough, he opens up his little suitcase and out comes the toweling, and here are these two casts, and boom, they're just dead ringers for it. And yeah, that blew me away. You know,
Yeah, absolutely.
That's why I say, you know, you can't know 100%, but I'm 99.9%. I'm as convinced as can be based on the evidence. I mean, at this point, to turn and say, you know, it's a good run, but heck with it. It's probably all just hoaxed, and walk away from it would be so disingenuous, would be so, you know, so, yeah. So
it's just a matter of time and research and keeping everybody on the same page and not falling into those traps that were set for you there in Russia, and just to stay the course, you know, just stay the course. And that's one thing, as kind of, I don't want to say younger researchers, because we're in our mid-30s, but there
Early
is a young
30s. I'm in my early 30s.
I have to age him up so that I can age down a little bit. I just turned 36, so I'm shy. I feel like I'm shy of late 30s still. I can fall into that mid 30 range, but we just want to get ourselves out there, and we are, you know, trying to learn as much as possible. And I think it's important for Sasquatch or any of the other fields that we are dipping our toes into, that, you know, younger generations are able to keep the interest and kind of keep the research alive. So
right.
it's important that, you know, researchers like yourself, the work that you've done, it should be analyzed and read and shared.
Right.
And so
let me just interject one of my biggest concerns. Again, not while acknowledging individuals' opinions and experiences and all possibilities, though the preoccupation with the woo distracts the younger generation from the types of stories I've just told that attest to the physicality, the normalcy, the biological rationality of the existence of these relic species that represent persistent branches on this bushy tree. You know, 50 years ago, there wasn't a scientific context to really accommodate something like this, and it was just relinquished to the monster realm. But now, anyone who says they can't exist, therefore they don't exist, first of all, that first proclamation is baseless and is indefensible. They can exist. There is ample reasons that they might exist, and then it boils down to the probability rather than the declarative they don't exist. But what is the probability then that some of these species have persisted? So I just hope that you know, the younger generation exposes themselves or digs in the right field to discover those interesting stories and nuggets of data and truth that point to a more rational explanation before getting caught up in the sensational, rather sensational and fantastical explanations that you can imagine that you really can't study. I mean, I don't know anyone that is studying orbs, you know, or studying portals if they ever actually saw one. And you know, like I said, I don't say that cavalierly or over generalized. I have I have entertained. I had someone come into my office and show me, he thought he had pictures of portals, and they were just weird artifacts of the shadowing and highlights that his camera captured, but he could see through into that shadow into another world, and he had this whole world imagined. And he'd sit there, can't you see this? Can't you see that? And no, there's no way. And his daughter had brought him up, and he was a somewhat older gentleman. I probably contributed to the situation, but I kind of glanced over at her, and she just had this look on her face, like she knew that this was total malarkey, but she was trying to, trying to be diplomatic with her father and support him in his interests and so forth. But it was just so far off base that I was just blown away. I mean, at first I thought he was pulling my leg, and I kind of chuckled, and then I didn't get the the punchline moment, the reaction from him to acknowledge that it was a joke. Oh no, he was dead serious. Drove all the way up from a distant city and to show me this, and I said, boy, I felt really bad. But anyway, the point is, like I said, I open myself up, I make myself available. I go out with a group or examine photograph, and it's like, here, this will make you feel younger. Do you remember the commercial? Which was it? It wasn't Burger King, was it? The "Where's the Beef" commercial?
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that.
The little old lady, and they open up the bun, and here's this quarter-sized hamburger patty in there. Where's the beef? Where's the beef? Where's the beef? That became the meme for anything that had no substance. An argument that was just put out there that was baseless. It's like your retort was, okay, well, where's the beef? You gotta put something out in order for the argument to be taken seriously. And so, again, like I said at the beginning, the responsibility rests on those advocates of these kinds of explanations to provide the documentation, to provide the, any kind of validation of that sort of stuff. I mean, I have to laugh every time you hear about the communications. When someone talks about channeling with the Bigfoot, just ask them, what do you talk about? And it reminds me, and again, this is not to be misogynistic or sexist in any way, shape, or form, but it reminds me of the stereotype of the Miss America question session, where they're asked a question and they give this word salad or whatever, and it ends with world peace and brotherly love.
Right.
The answers are always just their new age mumbo jumbo, and it just doesn't there's no substance whatsoever. And I've had so many experiences with claimants in that regard. They had nothing meaningful to say, or they have these wildly concocted. I have well, let's put him on the spot. Dr. Matthew Johnson. I mean, how anyone can listen to his rants, his ravings, and take him seriously is just beyond me. But
we don't have him on the calendar, do we?
Good luck to Zanu,
We do not. I've actually never even heard of him.
Why is he singled out as the ambassador? I'd like to know. I mean, I've done more to promote the. That's just it. There's just one more funny anecdote, and we'll quit. But you get all the stories about the Black Ops helicopters and the men in black and the unmarked SUVs, and people showing up on your porch and bullying you and demanding your evidence. And hey, no one's ever knocked at my door. No one's ever rifled my files. No one's ever stolen my casts. So it was at Ohio. We had a panel discussion going on, and I think there were some of the Expedition Sasquatch guys or Bigfoot guys and gals and some others. I can't remember who was all on the program, but the question about conspiracy theories that came up and government knowledge and so forth and so forth. And there were varying opinions, and then the mic was handed to me, and I just gave this, kind of looked at the tabletop and gave this long pregnant pause, and then I says, well, this feels about right. I think it's time to come clean. I am a government agent that was placed at ISU to disseminate disinformation and to keep all you guys going barking up the wrong tree. And the government has a secret program, and you could. It was so funny because literally for a few moments that you could hear a pin drop. This because there were actually people in the room that thought I was on the up and up, and then finally, I couldn't hold it any longer. I started chuckling, and the room burst into laughter. But it was a good laugh for everybody.
Yeah, that's that's pretty funny. But I want to go ahead and thank you for your time. I had
Yes, thank you.
an awesome time talking to you. I hope maybe someday in the future we can do it again. And I always just give the last couple of moments to our guests to promote anything. If you have any conferences that you're going to speak at, or if you want to, let everybody
Sure.
know where they can find your books, the floor is yours.
Well, you've got the title of the book there, and it can be had on Amazon, or also Paradise K is a good distributor. That's K with a CAY, Paradise K Publishers. They also published my field guides and some of the other books. I just completed a line of activity and learning books for young readers, and but the artwork is so engaging that I say 8 years old and up, because adults, I still have fun going flipping through and admiring the artwork, but it has all sorts of learning activities. I introduce geography. There are maps. I always loved maps growing up. The cultural aspects, the ecology of the region, tracking, etc., etc. So they're really fun. So that's paradiseK.com. And then I would also point your viewers to the online journal, which I mentioned, the Relic Hominoid Inquiry. And you can find it if you Google relict with a T, relict hominoid, that's the proper usage in biology, inquiry, it'll take you right to it. Otherwise, it's www.isu.edu/RHI. And as I said, we're in our 13th year. There are original research papers, essays, in-depth book reviews. So like if you're thinking about whether it's worthwhile to buy X, Y, or Z, you might find some insight there, or even some more background or clarification. There are news and comments and also interesting, excuse me, interesting historical documents. We've had the good fortune to be able to reprint some important papers, as well as translations of foreign papers. So, for example, speaking of Russia, Mary Jean Kaufman's seminal papers have been translated to English and are reprinted there. And it's, I think you'll find it a treasure trove of good stuff, especially against the backdrop of the plethora of kind of pulpy books, that self-published pulpy books that are flooding the market these days. And it's good, solid information, data-driven information.
All right, excellent. So I implore all of our listeners to check that stuff out, and we'll hold on to you for just 1 minute when we're done recording here, so to make sure that the upload works out. But in the meantime, it's Bigfoot week here at Sasquatchers. So anybody listening, keep an eye out. We have a couple of more episodes following this one, and the bar's been set. It's pretty high. I hope everybody else can follow that.
Yeah. Don't spoil the evidence, Igor.
Thanks for squatching, everybody.